everyone, Steve Johnson here. Welcome to today's episode on latent linguistic evidence. That is evidence displayed linguistically that is hiding in plain sight, that is right in front of you that you probably didn't recognize. Just like latent fingerprints, you can't see them until you apply a certain procedure, and then we can not only see them but lift them and preserve them as evidence. Well, there's evidence in our language as well, latent linguistic evidence. For those of you that don't know, I'm a 34-year criminal investigator, 28 years of those with a local police department, investigating major crimes. And for the past several years, I've been a trainer and a consultant, and I currently consult on cold cases with the Cold Case Foundation. I'm a linguistic analyst, and I use these techniques that I'm going to talk about in this channel not only to identify and convict the guilty, but also to clear those that were actually telling the truth. And in all my years in law enforcement, this is the most effective technique that I ever used in my interviews and in my investigations. And now I consult and teach others how to do the same thing. I have classes online and in person. So this channel exists to showcase the effectiveness of the linguistic analysis, not only for criminal cases, but also for corporate investigations and human resource investigations, as well as hiring application analysis. I can't say enough about that. You want to make sure you're hiring the right person that is not going to steal from you in some way or another while they are employed at your company, or maybe they are at risk for filing those workplace injury or sexual harassment complaints. Those are the people that you would like to identify in the very beginning and not hire them. And likewise, identify those that might have strong characteristics that would be a good fit for your company. So this also has applications to legal case work and in your personal life, whether you're dealing with family member, your neighbor, the veterinarian, a salesman, your teenagers, what have you, multiple applications across the board. So before we get into today's case, please do me a favor and hit the subscribe button and tell others about this channel. So the case that I want to profile today is a case that was introduced to me several years ago by my friend and colleague, Peter Hyatt. That is the Katelyn Markham case. And the suspect in this case is John Carter. I have been using this case for many years in my classes. And the reason I've done that is there is so much linguistic evidence in this case that identifies the guilty person, which in this case is John Carter, and that it just flabbergasted me that John Carter had not been arrested for many, many years. It took 12 years to arrest him, and that did not happen until just last March. And his case is coming up for trial, scheduled for trial this June. We'll see if it actually goes in June or not. I hope it does. And so it's coming up quick. So I wanted to point out a few things regarding this case that are really interesting and show how linguistic evidence is manifested by those that particularly have guilty knowledge. There's a couple of different things I'm going to show you. One being the 911 call that John Carter made to report his girlfriend or his fiancée, Katelyn Markham, as missing. And then the other thing is a few media clips, interviews that he did with the news, and those are just a gold mine of information. The information that he leaked out, that his brain knew and his words could not contain. It's just incredible, and this happens all the time. This is just a really good example of how this occurs. And so I wanted to profile it because it's going to be one of those cases that'll be in the news as his case comes to trial. And it's just a fantastic example. I'm so happy that he was finally arrested. So if you don't know a lot about this case, Katelyn Markham She disappeared, was reported as missing by her fiance John Carter on August 14th, 2011. Now, John and Katelyn had been dating for about 5 years. They had been engaged for about 1 year. They lived really close to each other. I've heard that it's about Katelyn's townhome and John's home where he lived with his mom was only about 1,000 feet apart from each other. And Katelyn was an art major student studying, I believe, graphic design. She was at the time of her disappearance, it was just prior to her 22nd birthday. She was getting ready to graduate, I believe, nearing the end of her college days. And her and John had been discussing going to Colorado, moving there. And it was just a really strange circumstances that Katelyn would just suddenly disappear. So John worked at as a pizza delivery guy. My understanding is he was not in college, wasn't doing much of anything else. Katelyn was kind of the go-getter. And so it was just kind of a mismatched couple. And Katelyn was, according to her friends, was pretty bubbly. But before her disappearance, they could see that some of that effervescence for life had been diminishing a bit, and John had been kind of pushing her to move to Colorado to get away from family and friends. So he didn't feel like they liked him, it's my understanding, and so he was trying to convince her to move to Colorado. And we'll hear a little bit about that in some of the media clips that are coming up. So John, on August 14th, called 911 and reported Katelyn missing. And I need to point out that prior to that, he also called Katelyn's dad. And instead of inquiring whether he had seen Katelyn or if Katelyn was at his house, if he'd heard from her, he just emphatically proclaimed to Dad that Katelyn was missing. And he was kind of jumping to the worst case scenario instead of scratching his head trying to figure out where Katelyn had gone and why she's not answering his phone calls. And so this obviously raised red flags for Katelyn's dad, and it was a little concerning, or a lot concerning. And also when John made the report that Katelyn was missing, and police arrived at Katelyn's townhome, they found that all of Katelyn's belongings were there. Her car keys, her purse, everything was there. Her dog was there. And the only thing that was missing was Katelyn's cell phone. And as it turns out, coincidentally, and there was no forced entry to the apartment. And coincidentally, Katelyn's cell phone went inactive at about a little after midnight. Actually, both John and Katelyn's cell phone went inactive, and they were just a few minutes apart from each other. And that was about midnight. John's phone went active again a few hours later, but Katelyn's phone never did go active again. So John claimed that Katelyn had sent him a text about 4 a.m., a good morning text of some sort. But John told the investigators that he had accidentally deleted all their text messages from that day. So obviously there's a lot I don't know about the case, which I'm glad, because a lot of that should be kept close to the vest for the trial, and so I'm glad that there's not more of it out in the public right now, so that they can have a successful prosecution. So Katelyn wasn't found until about a year and a half later, and her remains, skeletal remains, were found about 30 miles from her home, along a road that was, might get this wrong, Big Cedar South or Big Cedar Bend Road, but it was in the neighboring state. But coincidentally, it was Big Cedar Road, and coincidentally, it was just about a mile from an intersection that John would travel down to go to his father's property, and so he's very familiar with that area. It was just, her remains were discovered by a couple that were out looking for scrap metal, and they found her remains, which were wrapped in a black plastic sheathing. And actually, I don't know if it was black, but I think it was black. A plastic sheathing, kind of like a construction, or not construction, but a landscape underlayment material. Okay, so she was wrapped in that. So there's things that you're going to hear in not only his 911 call, but in his media clips, that early on in the investigation, before a lot of this information that I just told you was known, would have just not only pointed to him, but singled him out as a main suspect. But for the longest time, the police were reporting that John was not a suspect. I think that they did that just for the media. I think that there was a lot there in the beginning that would have made John a major suspect. I'm not sure what the situation was, why there wasn't an arrest made in the beginning, except that, of course, they didn't have a lot of physical evidence. And so I think that they did the right thing by holding off until they could make this case, and I'm glad that they eventually did, even though it took 12 years. It's a good thing, and it makes my heart glad to see that when justice comes to fruition. And in homicide cases, there is no statute of limitation. You can file those cases many years later. So it's one of the few cases where there is no statute of limitations for the homicide cases. They have as long as they need to make these cases, and it's better to take your time to make those cases than it is to hurry into something. So, okay, so I want to play for you, and I'm going to divide this up into two different videos. One being the 911 call, and the other, the media clips that were just within days of Katelyn going missing, and the community rallied together to help find Katelyn. And during that time, they interviewed John Carter, and so it's pretty awesome that we have those clips. So I'm going to go ahead and play for you the 911 call, and then we're going to do a breakdown of that 911 call. Then I'm going to play for you also the media clips, and like I said, I'll divide these up into two separate videos, and I'll break those down for you as well. And from those media clips especially, you will be able to see how difficult it is for anybody to keep hidden the things that their brain knows, to keep the information that they know locked up. It's virtually impossible if you know what to listen for. Some are more difficult than others, but there are always clues to what their brain actually knows, and they will give that away when they start to speak or write about it. It's just the most effective technique I have ever used in all my 34 years of investigating and consulting on criminal cases. It's just fantastic. I can't say enough about it. So I hope you enjoy this. Here is the 911 call that John Carter made. Take a listen and then we'll break it down.
Fairfield 911, where's your emergency?
Hi, my name is John Carter. I am calling. I know that you're not supposed to report a missing person before 24 hours, but my fiancée is missing. I can't find her anywhere.
Okay, where did you see her last?
I saw her at like 12 o'clock last night. She stays in a house by herself, so I'm really nervous. Her car is still there.
Okay,
her
where
purse is still.
Is there an address,
Yeah, 5214 Dorshire Drive.
5214?
Dorshire, yes.
Okay. And you're out there now?
I'm heading out there now. I had been trying to get a hold of her, and I decided to go by her house to see if she was okay. And her car was still there. She would be at work right now with her car, which is why I'm like really freaking out.
What's her name?
Katelyn Markham.
Have you called hospitals or jails or anything? Where was she at midnight last night when you left?
She was at her house. She was going to bed. She wasn't going out to do anything, so she would have been in her bed. And I mean, I've been with her for 6 years. She's not deceiving, you know. She doesn't.
Okay, and you guys didn't have an argument or anything?
Not at all.
Is she on any medications or anything?
Not at all.
Has she had thoughts of suicide or anything like that?
No. Never.
Okay.
Never.
All right. And have you talked to her mom or anybody like that? See if
I called.
she's gone shopping or...
I called her father. The only thing that's not there is her cell phone, which is positive, but she's not answering it. So, and the Sacred Heart Festival is going on right up the street, and there's a lot of questionable people there, and it's just kind of... I'm sorry.
Okay. Well, we'll go ahead and we'll have somebody meet you there. What kind of vehicle are you going to be in?
A 2008 Ford Focus. It's red.
We'll have somebody come out and speak with you, okay?
Okay, thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Okay, let's break down John Carter's 911 call. There's a lot of interesting things in here, and if I was the case investigator from this 911 call alone, I would have been able to laser focus my investigation upon John Carter himself. So how do we do this? There's a lot of different things that we look for in 911 calls. There's things that we expect to hear, and there's things that we don't expect to hear. There are also some things that are often found in guilty 911 calls. In and of themselves, individually, we wouldn't conclude deception, but there are just certain things that we will flag in these 911 calls because we hear them a lot in the guilty callers. And so you'll see a lot of those in here. So the first thing that John does, he starts out, the question is, and I love the 911 calls, they're just a fantastic tool. And often in cases like this, they are the first interview, the very first interview, so it's fresh. And it's difficult for a person to that is going to be deceptive to get everything together and make everything flow, to make it all work out. Anything that is scripted or they think is going to be scripted, it's very difficult for them to think of everything. And so they only think about just those things that in their mind is just enough to make their story believable. And the rest they forget about, or they don't know. They don't know the things that we know, and the things that we know to look for. And so obviously they don't correct those things. They don't know how to correct their language. And in fact, it's very difficult for anyone, even with those that have training in statement analysis, linguistic analysis, statement profiling, whatever you want to call it. It's very difficult for even those with training if they are in the hot seat and lying about a crime that they committed. Because of human nature and the way that the brain reacts, it's very difficult for them to get away with lying about their crime or their activities. So that said, let's jump into this. So dispatch asks, what's your emergency? And John Carter begins with hi. It's a greeting. And this is one of those things that we flag in any 911 call. What is 911 for? It's for an emergency. And as such, we don't expect to hear any type of greeting. But that's the first thing that he did. And it's kind of a ingratiation into the police department, into the criminal investigators, to be one with them. And so we flag it. Now, some people just naturally say that. Some will say it out of nervousness. I get that. But I'm just telling you that it is one of those things that we see a lot in guilty 911 callers. Okay? So he says, hi, my name is John Carter. I'm calling. And then he self-censored. So he started to tell us what he's calling for. And now he's self-censored and he's going to tell us something that he knows that he's not supposed to do. He says, I know that you're not supposed to report a missing person before 24 hours, but my fiancée is missing. I can't find her anywhere. So I know that you're not supposed to report a missing person after, whatever that after was. I would just love to be inside his mind a little bit more, but I'm thinking that he's thinking about after what happened to her, what he did to her. But interesting that he's going to tell us what he knows he's not supposed to do, what you're not supposed to do. I know that you're not supposed to report a missing person after or before 24 hours. So he's portraying himself as a rule keeper, as a person that follows the rules, is law-abiding, he's trying to be uber helpful. And it's interesting, there are a lot of people that want to be helpful, but how many of them actually tell the police in a 911 call that this is what they're doing? That I am being so helpful. I know you're not supposed to do this, but my fiancée is missing. I can't find her anywhere. And that's just a subtle, that I can't find her anywhere, is a subtle linguistic indicator that if I can't find her anywhere, then you certainly aren't going to find her anywhere. And I got to admit that he did a pretty good job for quite a while, and Katelyn was not able to be found anywhere. So we have the ingratiation, we have him self-censoring and telling us what he knows he's not supposed to do. And by the way, anything stated in the negative, we always flag as very sensitive. It has extra meaning. And think about things that you say in the negative in your own language. I know I'm not supposed to do this, but which means it has extra meaning, anything in the negative. So we highlight that. Okay, so dispatch asks, okay, where did you see her last? In other words, where did you see her last? It's location. And we look for 911 callers to answer every question, to facilitate this flow of information. And John does not answer the question. He says, I saw her at like 12 o'clock last night. So he tells us when he saw her, not where he last saw her. But this next part of his statement is interesting. He says, she stays in a house by herself. So he's implying that because she stays in a house by herself, and now he started to go to talk about where she would be, why she would be in the house, but he's self-censored again. And we're going to get to that in just a little bit. He's going to pick it back up. He can't leave it alone. But interesting that he did not answer the question. So again, and just another thing that we stack. We're going to stack all these things. So we stack that onto our list. He didn't answer the question. He tells us when he saw her. And now he says, I'm really nervous. Her car's still there, her purse is still, and he trails off. Dispatch actually interrupted him and asked for an address. So John now has expressed emotion for himself. He's expressed his own emotions rather than focusing solely on Katelyn. And if he really was feeling so much concern for her and so much emotion wrapped up in his being racked over concern over Katelyn, that's where his emotion would be. It would be all about Katelyn. He could say, I'm concerned for her. It's out of the ordinary. It's just not the norm for her. And he might rattle off a few things of why this is not the ordinary for her and why he's concerned. But it would always revert back to concern for Katelyn. And now we have him expressing his own emotion, turning the focus upon himself, which is very common. When people can express their own emotion and get it across to somebody else, that's one of the most effective manipulative techniques. That is how people are talked in and conned into departing with their money in scams, or in just any sales. If you can appeal to emotion, you're going to be able to sell whatever it is, relate to somebody. Emotion is just one of those things that is very difficult to overcome. It will bias us. Emotion will get in the way of our logical thinking. It will override logical thinking. So that's just how powerful emotion is. It's one of those tools that manipulators know to use and use it well. So that's what he's doing. He's employing emotion about himself, how difficult it is for him at this point in time. Okay, so now dispatch asks, is there an address? He gives the address. And now remember, John had said her car's still there, her purse is still. So dispatch now asks this question, okay, and you're out there now, and it's an appropriate question based on what he had said, of what he knows is still there. And now he says, I'm heading out there now. So that's a head scratcher. It's like, wait a minute, if you're not there, this would mean that you had been there. And we're going to find out later in John's story to the police, when they questioned him, he said that he did go to her apartment to look for her. She wasn't there. Then he went back to his work at the pizza place, and that's where he called 911, or about that time when he called 911. He went back there to turn in some money from previous deliveries. And so anyway, it's a clue here. He gave himself away that, well, I'm heading out there now. I have been trying to get a hold of her, and I decided to go by her house. And here's why he decided to go by her house: to see if she's okay. And her car's still there. She would have been at work right now with her car, which is why I'm really freaking out. So again, he's reverting back to emotion for himself, not the concern for Katelyn necessarily. It's more for him. Interesting point here, though. He says she would be at work right now with her car. Yet, where did he go to look for her? He never told the police he went to look for her at her work. And he's not telling dispatch, 911 operator, that he went to her work. Okay? He went to her house. So he didn't think it all the way through. He should have said, I went to her work to see if she was okay, because that's where she would be. But that's not what he said. So he got it mixed up, and you're going to see that he does this. It's very difficult for these people to keep things straight. And so now dispatch asks, okay, what's her name? He gives her name, Katelyn Markham. Dispatch asks, have you called the hospitals or jails or anything? He starts to answer, and then dispatch interrupted him, and she says, where was she at midnight last night when you last saw her? John says, she was at her house. Now, this is key here. He says, she was going to bed. Now, if she was at her house and going to bed, that would be enough. All he has to do is say, I saw her at her house. She was getting ready for bed. But now he says, she wasn't going out to do anything, so she would have been in her bed. In other words, it's not enough for me to just tell you that she was at her house and going to bed. Now he feels like he has to convince the dispatcher that she was there. And so it's like, and to convince you that she was there, she wasn't going out to do anything, so she would have been in her bed. Think about the word she would have been in her bed. Was she or wasn't she? Would have been in her bed necessitates an if. If I had really seen her, if she had really been at her house when I last saw her, if I wasn't lying, or what have you. That's words, that's language that we don't expect to hear from someone speaking from experiential memory. That is not experiential. That is made up, convincing language to convince the dispatcher that she was at her home. Now, it gets even better. And he says, and I mean, I've been with her for 6 years. In other words, I would know what she was going to do. You should believe me that I knew what she was going to do because I've been with her for 6 years. And now it gets even better. She's not deceiving, you know. She doesn't. Where in the world did that come from? Dispatch never asked about whether she was deceiving or not. Where did that come from? It came from John's brain. It's called brain leakage. John knows that he's being deceptive here. He's trying to blame this on Katelyn somehow. But that is a classic example of latent linguistic evidence. It's latent content that is coming out. He's revealing the fact that he is thinking about deception. Okay? And it's not Katelyn being deceptive. She's not deceiving, you know. She doesn't. So dispatch interrupted there, and dispatch says, okay, and you guys didn't have an argument or anything? He says, not at all. Best answer is just no, but he's, keep in mind, he's going over the top to convince dispatch. Dispatch says, okay, is she on any medications or anything? Not at all. Has she any thoughts of suicide or anything like that? No, never. Never. All right. Have you talked to her mom or anybody like that to see if maybe she's out shopping or... Now he says, I called her father. That's all he says about the phone call with her father. He didn't say anything about what her father said to him, about whether or not her father had any ideas where Katelyn might be. Nothing like that. And we learned later from Katelyn's father that John called him and did not ask him where Katelyn was or if he had heard from her or seen her. John emphatically declared to him that Katelyn was missing. In other words, he went to the worst case scenario. He had already made that conclusion. He already knew Katelyn is missing. There was no ifs, ands, or buts about it. And that obviously concerned Katelyn's father. It would concern me as a father, and it would raise the red flags for me as well. That's why he didn't go into any further details about this conversation with Katelyn's father. He just said, I called her father. Now, he went into a total different context, which is something we don't expect. I expect him to talk about this conversation with the father. That was the question dispatch asked. So now he's going to steer the investigation, which is very typical of our guilty suspects. He says, the only thing that's not there is her cell phone, which is positive, but she's not answering it. So, and the Sacred Heart Festival is going on right up the street, and there's a lot of questionable people there. In other words, let me steer this investigation for you people and help you. Hey, her cell phone's not there, so that's a good thing, meaning she might have it. But you guys should go check out the Sacred Heart Festival right up the street. There's a lot of people there, a lot of questionable people there. I think you ought to go question all of them. That'll keep you busy for a long time, seeing if any of those people know anything, okay? He's steering the investigation. It's very, very common. So then he says, and it's just kind of, I'm sorry. The words I'm sorry used for whatever reason in these 911 calls are typically an indication that he has something to be sorry for. It doesn't always mean that he is guilty. However, it is something that we always note that it is like a psychological pressure relief valve. In other words, being deceptive, scripting something like this, trying to cover up a murder or any other major crime or infraction of any type, it's stressful. And when it's actually sometimes easier to commit a crime than it is to lie about it. When it comes to lying about it face to face with somebody else or on the phone with dispatch or 911, and you have to get everything right, that is stressful, okay? It's difficult for people to do. And to relieve that pressure that's building up from the guilt, the psychological pressure, they will often say something like, I'm sorry. And it comes out of the blue. There's no coughing or sneezing or crying or anything like that. It just comes out of the blue. And people will say, I'm sorry. I hear it in 911 calls. I hear it in their statements, in their interviews, and it just comes out of the blue. And it's always one of those things that we're on alert for. When we hear it, it's like, oh, psychological pressure relief. You needed to open up that valve and relieve some pressure because it was building up in your brain and in your body. And actually, our guilt is not just in our brain, it is physiological. That's why the polygraph works, the voice stress analysis works. It's because the physiological reactions to stress and guilt build up within us. It causes our heart rate to increase, our perspiration to increase. It is stressful. Physiologically, our muscles weaken. It's incredible what the stress from deception does to us physiologically within our bodies. So a lot of things going on there. I can see why he would want to relieve that pressure that's building up in him. And so now he says, dispatch says, okay, well, we'll go ahead and have somebody meet you there. What kind of vehicle are you going to be in? He says it's a 2008 Ford Focus. It's red. Okay, well, somebody meet you there. Okay, bye-bye. Okay, so there you have the 911 call. There are so many things in that 911 call alone. It's several of the things that we do not expect to hear in a 911 call, but we're on alert for, It's extraneous information that we often hear in guilty 911 callers. In the class that I teach, I have a whole section on 911 calls and all the information that we expect to hear in 911 calls, do not expect to hear, and those things that are extraneous information that comes out, extra information that we often hear in the guilty 911 calls. And those are things that are extremely useful for those that are working in criminal investigations. It can also be for any corporation or anybody that is taking, listens to reports, people calling in, making a report or writing a complaint, their initial complaint or call. We want to be able to evaluate those things to know if they are actually being truthful or if there are things in there that indicate that it is being made up. And so extremely useful. And here we have a good start to this case. Right from the get-go with a 911 call, there are indications that John Carter is a person that we cannot disregard. We have to look at John Carter closer. There are indications in here that he likely does have guilty knowledge of Katelyn's disappearance. He has gone to actually worst case scenario that she's missing, and we know from what he said to Katelyn's father that it's emphatic. He's just emphatic about it, that there's no other plausible scenario. She's gone. And so next we're going to listen to the media interviews, and you will see how much latent content, latent linguistic evidence is revealed in his language. And I'll tell you a little bit about what police recovered in their search warrants last year when they searched his home. And it's significant evidence linking John to the homicide of Katelyn Markham. So I hope you enjoyed that. The latent linguistic evidence is one of those things that any investigator needs to know how to recognize and use. It is just imperative for any investigator, especially criminal investigators, to know how to use. But even for those of you that aren't actually investigators, but you like to get involved in the cases that are out there, it's key for anybody that wants to solve any type of case. And these 911 calls for criminal investigators are just a gold mine of information. If you're in law enforcement, I hope that this is one of those things that you start using to gain more information for your cases. They often will reveal to you right away whether you're looking at a guilty 911 caller or someone that is de facto innocent, and it'll help steer your investigation the right way right from the get-go. So hope you enjoyed that. Remember to click that subscribe button. Check out the courses I have on my webpage, truthtolies.com, and I'll see you next video.